And so I think everyone probably knows what a query is, but just in case you're not sure, it's a question, a search question or that you want answered, and it's represented in code in the way that a database can understand it. The command that starts it all off, the select command. So people have about case sensitivity and order of typing, and the answer is nothing matters. You can really, I'm going to teach you approaches that are recommended, and it's helpful for learning to just memorize them this way and work on it. But it doesn't matter what way you do it because it'll work. There's no formatting rules. Okay. But it's best to learn it this way, the way we're presenting it, because it helps you remember logically how things go. So and I just want to remind you, when we're working in Workbench, and you'll see it today, when you're typing in commands, especially ones that have multiple lines, there will be a red X until you've made it something that it can understand completely, which is helpful, because as long as that red X is there, something is missing. And as soon as you don't have the red X, it means you've managed to tell it language it understands, like you've managed to build the query appropriately. So that's a very nice, helpful visual cue that you get in Workbench that you wouldn't get in a shell, for instance. That's one of the reasons that the GUI is so user-friendly. Okay, so there's 3 layers or elements to the simple query, which is the select, the from, and the where clauses. So you have to have the first 2. If you want to see data from your database, you must say select and you must say from. You do not have to say where. If you do select and from, you're going to get all the rows, but there's 2 scenarios. Either you can get all the rows no matter what, but you can get all the columns or some of the columns. And we'll talk about those 2 scenarios. And then almost an infinite number of things you can get. So we'll work on that. So it's select cust ID, comma, first name, last name, balance, and from customer with a semicolon at the end, which again, it will work without the semicolon, but it's better for your future to just do it because some systems won't. You're on the select line is the columns to include that you want, and from the customer. So this is one of those times when I can talk about order. Okay. Remember at its core that a database does not care what order you put your tables, your columns and rows in, like doesn't matter. But once you do define your table, you do have an order to the columns that you've defined. And then you need to follow that order when you're entering your data. So otherwise it won't put it in the right spots. But when you want to get it out, you could put those columns in different order and it would generate the results table in a different order, right? So right here you see cust ID, first name, last name, balance. That's because that's the order we wrote. We could have written cust ID, balance, first name, last name. We could do it in whatever order. I think this is a pretty logical order for humans to take in, but you can just know that you can tell it whatever order and it'll pull it up that way. Does that make sense? We'll keep talking about order because I think it's a really interesting question. So you're going to use an asterisk to indicate all columns in the select clause. And the default will be that it will bring up the columns in the order used when the table was created. So again, just like I just said, if you want them in a different order, which you might, you have to just list them out. So you can't use the asterisk if you want to change the column order. So you're going to need to list all the columns in the order you want them to be in. So let's look at that. So select asterisk from item. This is all the items in the item table. So it's got item ID, description, on hand, category, location, and price. So if we wanted to have those columns in any different order for any reason, we would have to just type it in. Okay. Now, the good news is you can have somewhere you keep a database schema, which is kind of all of what are all the tables and all the rows and everything and how is it structured. And then you could just copy those names, column names from your schema and just switch them around. So it doesn't have to be a lot of typing, right? If you keep a location with all of your database schema, then you just copy it over. Okay, so we just talked about the 2 scenarios without the where, right? So we just select from, that's when you want all rows. No matter what, you get all rows in that scenario. Now we're going to add in the special cases, which is the where clause. This is using just the rows that satisfy a condition. And very simple is just the column name and a comparison operator followed by a name or a value. So let's just look. So we can just, at the very simple, we want to find what is the last name, that's select last name, from customer, that's from the customer table, where the ID is 125. What's the last name of customer 125? Boom, it's Smith. And that's the 3 lines. Again, do they have to be tabbed in? No. Do they have to even be all on the different lines? No, remember, there's not really any formatting rules, but these customs and these habits make your queries easier to edit, easier to track where there might be mistakes, etc. So it's recommended to follow these patterns. Do they need to be all caps? No, nothing about it needs to be that. Just, okay. The value is enclosed in single quotation marks because it's a character column. Okay, we don't need it if it's a number, but if it's CHAR or VAR, CHAR, the variable or fixed versions, then you have to put it in the single quotes. Here's some of the comparison operators. Equal to, less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. And this one is how you do not equal to. Let's just talk about what we've said so far. We've said we can do just the select and from with indicating certain columns. We can do the select with the asterisk, or say all the columns typed out in a different order. And then we can also do just like a specific request, like I want to know what last name for this ID number. Or now we're going to say we can add this comparative using compound conditions. So that's the and operator, like this and that. Okay, everyone probably is used to hearing these. These are often called Boolean operators. It's and, or not. So and is that all the things must be true. Or means this or that must be true. And not, it reverses the truth of the original condition. So not this, like instead of this being true, I want it to be not true. So it reverses it. Okay, those are your 3. Okay, so if we want to do with and condition on separate lines, you can do it select description from item where location is B and on hand is greater than 15. Notice they put the and here, but you could put it at the start of the next line and it wouldn't matter. Okay, so that's how we can have 2 things at the same time. That it's in this location, but it's also in this range. Okay. Then if you want to do or, it's select description from item where it's either at location B or there's 15 on hand. Right? It's showing a point, like you get with or, you get more. Does everybody see that you get more results with or? Because this is possible or that. So everything that meets either one of those gives you more than just that they both have to be true. So or gets you more. But in that case, I find this kind of a useless list. Why? What would I would add something into the select line. What would I want to know if I really ran a query like this? What would be useful to know to make these results meaningful? Well, some of these are in location B, but we don't know how many they have on hand. Or some of them are more than 15, but we don't know what location they're in, right? So to me, it's almost useless to do an or without having those columns show, because you don't know what you're dealing with. So I would add more columns into this query, but this is just demonstrating a point of how you use or. And then with not, so here we say select description from item, and we're actually excluding location B. Okay, where we say not location equals B. This would be useful if you had a lot of locations. For instance, let's say I'm in a retail situation where I'm using SQL and I'm in location B and I just want to know all the stores that have it that's not my store. So you just say where, not my location. And then you see all the other ones, right? But I still say that it would be interesting to show, because this is such an open-ended query, I would rather also, in addition to description, I would want to see the location because I want to know where am I sending someone. But again, we're just learning how to use it. Okay, but does everybody see here that with not, there's actually parentheses? Because there's a statement that would be true, like location equals B, and we put that in parentheses with the not. Between, so that's it for all the operators. Now we're going to talk about between. Okay, so we sometimes want to not just be greater than, not just be less than, but we want to actually get ranges in between a range of values. And you can do this instead of using, oh, I want everything that's greater than this and less than that, which is one way you could do a range. So we're doing it instead of an and operator. It makes the select command easier to construct, but you don't have to use it. It's not essential because you could just do it with an and by using the endpoint ranges, greater than this and less than that. But this is nice to know that you can do the between. So if you say between 125 and 250, values of 125 through 250 would make the condition true. So inclusive of the endpoint. Okay, so that is select customer ID, first name, last name, balance, where from customer, where the balance is between 125 and 250. So utilizing the between operator. What is the way we would do it without the between?
Would the where line look like if you use the compound approach with and instead of between? Remember that at the beginning of this presentation, I mentioned that there are no formatting rules. So what you're seeing here are just suggested patterns in order to make your scripts easy to read and easy to edit. But if you want to make sure something is going to work, one thing you can always rely on is referring to the SQL documentation. And believe me, that's what the professionals do because they're always growing and changing. And so it's good to check, depending on which software package you're using in your professional setting, that you're following the syntax and protocol for a particular command. But also consider using trial and error to see what works and what works for you.
I do think a little trial and error is a great thing. And I love that when you're in Workbench, you'll get the little red X and it'll tell you if you're off with your syntax.
So that's going to wrap up what I wanted to teach you for this module about the select command and some of the basic operators that you can use to make more complex queries. We will pick up in the next module with how you create computed columns and a little bit more of advanced commands.